Hey guys, hey Sebastian, welcome to IndustriaNX, and happy to welcome you along with my friend Kris here. You did a video with Amit, I think, and Amit got best of you, and it got a lot of us curious about asking more questions. So we are just trying to follow up on that part. So why don't we start with a brief introduction of yourself, and then Kris and I can just touch upon on our introduction a bit in case somebody is watching new, and then we can kickstart the discussion. So go ahead, Sebastian.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you so much, Sachin and Kris, for having me on. It's a great pleasure. So yeah, for me, if you guys hadn't met me on Amit's channel, but my name is Sebastian, and I actually work in an investment bank. So just to preface, all the things I'm going to talk about in this video, they aren't reflective of the company's views. It's just my own personal views as a shareholder in Palantir. But with that said, like my role in an investment bank, I sit on the private side, and the most simple way to think about it is in the investment banking role, we connect buyers and sellers. In my specific job, I work primarily with private equity type clients. So whether that's helping private equity type clients try to raise money to buy another company or any sort of thing related to the private equity space, what I mean by connecting buyers and sellers, if they're trying to raise capital, somebody needs to buy that type of like debt or a bond, and so we have to go out and find buyers for that type of debt issuance. So that's a kind of like in my role, where I sit in between. But yeah, that I would say being in that role and being with the bank for several years has given me the opportunity to take those kind of analytical skills and then apply it to the valuation of companies. Now, with that being in the role, given that I'm on the private side, very restricted in terms of like what I can and cannot do. For example, we cannot buy any individual securities, and if we wanted to sell any individual securities that we currently own, we would have to liquidate the entire position. So I took a stake in Palantir as a result prior to me actually joining the firm full time, and that's kind of where I've kept my conviction throughout the headwind of the macro markets.
That makes sense. Kris, you wanna go next?
Yeah, so my name's Kris. I work in healthcare IT. I've pivoted from a background in the military to more clinical setting, and now I'm in more in the IT realm. I see a lot of great new technologies that are coming pretty much daily. Like you won't believe how many purchase orders my hospital network has basically signed, and I work on a lot of the implementation side of things. So whenever I see products that are coming down the pipeline, I usually want to research the back end and see, what kind of backbone are they built on. And one of the things I've started to really notice is that a lot of companies they're starting to pivot to bringing value to you, not necessarily by showing you something new, but basically leading you to something that's going to save you a lot of money in the future. Healthcare in general right now is just really expensive, and there's a lot of areas that could use some improvements to reduce down costs, whether that be staffing costs or reducing down honestly a lot of waste. And so that kind of just lines up right to how I feel that a lot of new technologies can really get into the nitty gritty of healthcare and basically make pretty much the cost of doing business a lot more palatable, and also at the same time give the doctors and nurses and everyone a little bit more flexibility to focus on the patient rather than focus on the billing, because I think that's one of the areas that we've literally for the last 5-10 years been really headed towards, which is billing, and
Mhm.
we're spending less time with patients and more times with billing. But if there's a way to automate a lot of that stuff out, you can provide a lot of value. And I think that's one of the things that's a big driver for me. And I've been in Palantir, not during the DPO, but right around the DPO, mainly because I was really researching into different companies that Peter Thiel is invested into, because I was reading Zero to One. And one of the things I realized was, and in my course of day-to-day work, I realized that there's so many challenges that I have that honestly a product like Foundry could really help solve. And so it just got me thinking, hey, if this is something that I could possibly see myself using, then what is it? And that just kind of led into a rabbit hole of things that I want to just research into. And then I, over time, just became more and more confident. I reached out to some of the people in the Twitter community, like Sachin, of course, and it just kind of reinforced a lot of the things that I was thinking. So that's been a big help for me. And I'm glad that guys like you around the other industries are also like realizing that there is something there. Not all of us can honestly put put everything in 100% context. But I think jointly, if we all look at it from like different perspectives and combine our theses, then we can actually, create pretty much fit all those pieces in that puzzle together. Because a
Exactly.
lot of people still think it's like a black box, and it's not a black box. I feel like so many times, like they're telling you what they do, but they're telling you in a different language. And the thing is, like, you need a person to kind of translate that. I think this guy Code Strap on YouTube, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. He's like, seems like the most like Rosetta Stone-ish in terms of trying to explain the technology.
I agree.
So I'm in the same boat, right? I'm just trying to learn a lot more and just see what's happening. But I'm sorry, I took a little bit too much time. Go ahead, Sachin. We could discuss this all day.
No, I think it was very helpful. So I think I have given my introduction several times. I think the most important thing what people need to understand from my introduction that I come from a community of people who walk in the corporate corridors, that rarely anyone come out of it and talk openly what's going on there. So I advise large companies. I spend a lot of my time with C-suite advisors, regulators on topic, sometimes related to policy, energy policies related to a nation, large digital transformation, and people like me. Yeah, we are just not supposed to speak sometime, especially on the social media. But I somehow kind of pivoted from it and yeah, moved into more in entrepreneurial mode and leaving my corporate career behind now. So let's start, Sebastian, and let me start with some hard questions first. Why analyst community don't get companies like Palantir and Tesla in the earliest phase overall?
I would say it's goes back to what they think of growth. And a lot of times we have this preconceived notion of what we think growth should be, and it's typically in a linear fashion. Versus a lot of these technologies, whether it's new or something that is being disrupted in some sort of way, you can see this usually take the shape of like an S curve, which we've talked about a lot. But it's hard to contextualize or even put something on paper. Where are you in this S curve? Are you at the beginning? Are you at the end? Or are you just getting to that middle point? And so trying to figure out like a growth company and valuing a growth company. I saw a stat the other day, or maybe it was today actually, that when they came out in 2012 with their coverage of Facebook stock, in 2020 they projected about 20 billion in top line revenue. It was more than 80 billion in 2020. So it's hard to contextualize where are you in this S curve for the technology that's being adopted, because you can get it so wrong. And it's hard to pinpoint where you are, because that's where the growth, like if you want to be a great growth investor, you got to catch things at the earliest stage of their S curve. It's hard to define when that early stage is, but if you can see that tipping point happening, that's the best time to invest. So like I would say, like, it's hard as an investor if you were to try to get into Tesla in 2012, 2014. Now, some people had that early way of developing conviction, which even in hindsight, as an investor, I don't think I would have been able to get there. But once you see like that tipping point starting like 2018, 2019, after the ramp up of the Model 3, and you can see demand clearly there, that's when you can say, all right, we're at a tipping point now. And that's the best time to invest, because clear, like risk reward, I think is the best point there. The clarity is almost like not 100% certain, because obviously nothing's 100% certain, but the clarity is as clear as it's ever been in like the history of a company when you could invest. And then all it is that's left is execution. So I think, relating this to Palantir, a lot of people think that, okay, they've guided for 30% revenue growth. And if you look at like across the street, a lot of equity analysts are usually top line, like their usual guidance, or not guidance, but their usual estimates for top line growth, which is revenue, is staying with that 30% that management's guided for. But we as investors, we want to say, well, they're probably sandbagging this 30% guidance. So we need to define what is their entire growth for the next 5 to 10 years, because that's truly how you value a growth company. And a lot of, like, I guess coinciding with this is that a lot of equity analysts or just general research analysts like to think a little bit of the short term. I think for growth companies like this, to truly see their S curve play out, you need at least a 10-year horizon. It makes things a little bit ambiguous though, because you can't nobody can clearly predict that it's going to happen in the next 10 years, but you can try to get close. So I guess, like, in summary there, it's the difficulty of being able to see where you are in an S curve. And at the same time, it's the lack of clarity you get when you try to think like more than 5 years out, 10 years out, what you have to do for some of these growth companies. Like I would say in this case, Palantir.
I think makes sense. I would like to add a couple of examples, like what I see, and then I mean I'll ask Kris to extend on that as well. See, one of the thing which, like even the people who understand growth and disruption, for example, even if I take the case of someone like Peter Thiel, I think he mentioned at one point that when they sold PayPal, their 90% of valuation was coming from the revenues that they projected 10 years onwards, and yet they underestimated by their own estimate that what could be the future worth of PayPal, even like going that wild. Another thing which I realized is, and see, I come from a community. I mean, I did MBA. Tesla was one of the strategy case we did, and my community is all about analysts and people of investment banking. And one of the things I realized that sometimes the way we frame a company is not right. Like for example, when everyone was trying to push and frame that Tesla is profitable because of EV credits, over the time I realized that the framing is a bit different, because when Volkswagen sells a car, Tesla is paid, and Tesla injects that money back in the business to create some factory in future, and they literally creating perpetual cash flow. So I love that business model when somebody else is funding your development. So the way that
Exactly.
sometimes
Exactly.
sometimes the way the things are framed is in the academic community or in the mainstream media. I think it's not perfect. It works 80 to 90% of time, and people are forced to believe this Pareto rule all the time. And when something doesn't work, they try to either reject it or they try to neglect it. But my view is like when the common rules are not working, this is exactly where you have the golden opportunity, and this is exactly where you can have some scams also. So it needs more care, but yeah, I mean, it's worth the risk looking into these things. Chris, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when you have new companies that have a completely new idea, it's really hard to value them because what you're doing is trying to compare them to other things. Like I would say the perfect example is what was the worth of Google back in 2003, 2004, right? Everyone just thinks, well, they're just going to be a search engine and there's tons of search engines around, so we should value them like a search engine, right? And that's what we should live them as. But what happened is over time, they weren't just search engines. They developed a lot more verticals that really extended their business into much further into the technology stacks. And I think it's the same thing with any real company. I mean, a lot of times I keep hearing that Tesla is just a car company, and I would say, yeah, maybe they were a car company in 2012, but they've pivoted way beyond the cars, where the car is just the mode of, it's almost like that's what they're using to get in through the front door, but they have so many other technologies that are being incorporated, and it just goes right back into they're solving a lot of challenges. So they are a tech company. You look at their margins don't reflect a car company. Their growth does not reflect a car company. They reflect a lot more than that. So I would say right now it's kind of the same thing when we look at Palantir. Is that we try to value it looking at some of the other companies out there, and we say, well, what's the peg ratio on this company, right? I know I personally, because I'm just biased against it. I have to model it based on another company's growth trajectory, because that at least gives me some validation at a base level to say, okay, at some level, this is what they're probably going to perform like. And
Hmm.
I wouldn't say competitive, the closest company that I see that has a very similar trajectory and probably the same exact execution risks is something like Salesforce. Salesforce
Right.
is completely B2B. They're growing at 30%, on average between 25 and 30 something percent. They're free cash flow positive. For the most part, they're not really, they don't have a consumer product. Their
Right.
gross margins are 70%, just like Palantir is, right? So there's so many similarities that I saw with regards to Salesforce and Palantir, but
Hmm.
there's one big difference between Salesforce and Palantir in that Salesforce, after a certain period of time, went into acquisition mode where they're
Exactly.
growing through
Yep.
acquisition, right?
Hmm.
Where
Hmm.
Palantir is like, no, we're building things ourselves, right? So I think that's going to be a key differentiator between between a company like Salesforce, which is now at a really mature point in their life cycle where they're buying growth, and Palantir, who's still organically trying to create new products that are going to be very well adapted into the future. So I think that's going to be one thing to definitely look at. I am just going to leave for 2 seconds because I'm having some trouble with my camera. Let me just fix that real quick, and I'll rejoin you guys in just a second. All right.
No worries, man.
Yeah.
So, in the meantime, I mean, Sebastian, you saw the argument that Kris made on Salesforce, and it's quite a valid argument. I mean, it's a B2B company, and we can draw some parallel also. Of course, like when companies are so unique, it's very difficult to bring 100% parallel out of it. Okay.
Mhm.
But we are talking here like a growth of 30%. I think, and people like you and me, I mean, we are not very happy at times with the growth of 30% when Palantir says, but even with 30%, what we are looking is that if they end up with 1.5 billion this year, that means in next 10 years, they will reach somewhere around 20, 21 billion dollar revenue. Okay. And that's quite a number.
It's a
Okay.
lot. Yeah.
But that's a
I think
lot.
I think
So
I forecasted exactly that. It's like, yeah, it's about, if you grow 30% on 1.5, you're looking at like about 16 billion. Still a lot.
yeah. So the question then comes is that can they maintain 30%?
Mhm.
I mean, we are biased people. We think even 30% when they say, oh, they are sandbagging. But the question is that they said 30% only in 2024. Can they maintain 30%? I mean, what do you think about the macro in general that is supporting that kind of growth in general?
I think in Carb's last interview, he really set the stage well in saying that, what future do you believe? Do you feel like the future that we're going to have is going to be more data driven or less data driven? It seems like the answer is so obvious, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not so obvious. Maybe there's a way that there's some execution risk there where, like, this kind of goes back to also what like Dave Lee had said on his channel about Palantirs. Would you rather own the data or be able to be the middleman? But I guess not saying that Palantir is the middleman here, but like the analytical provider to aggregate this data and then analyze it in a way that maybe benefits you to make data-driven decisions. Which one would you rather be? I think it's almost like, to answer his question there, I think I'd almost rather be where Palantir is, to be the one that allows companies to aggregate their data and then analyze it. Because if you have swarms of data, there's going to be so many companies that have that same problem, and eventually they're going to realize it. Maybe right now, maybe like the challenge for Palantir right now is maybe they're just a little too early. There's a chance that I'm thinking in my head is maybe right now many companies don't fully realize the value that Palantir can bring. Maybe they do, but even if they do in that instance, do they realize enough that they know that they need it, or it would be so beneficial to them that they're lacking not having it? So if they don't have it, then what is going to be the point that they see? Okay, we now need to go and use Palantir software. And so that's the point. Kind of going back to the first point, like the first question, like, where are you in this S curve? I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to believe as a shareholder, like we're at the beginning. And maybe we see like, you and I are not happy with just 30, 40% growth early on. We need to see stronger growth numbers. But maybe that's because we're at this early point of this S curve. Palantir is early. They're delivering a product that they're getting salespeople geared up for, but this product is not going to become right front and center for a lot of companies until maybe 25, 26, 27. And that's maybe where we see growth take off. So I guess that's the hardest part for me, is seeing like, okay, if they're just growing steadily, like it's like they're churning along right now. And maybe finally, they get to a point, I don't know when it's going to be, like, I guess like 25 through 6 or 7, when they finally are able to kind of reach takeoff mode. Every company realizes that they're so value additive that they're losing in a competitive advantage not having them. And that's when the growth really starts to accelerate. And that's maybe when we start to go sloping up the S curve. That's my thought. Maybe that's where we are. Maybe we're at the beginning.
That makes sense. So I think I want to set record straight for this, because this discussion has happened several times, and like Dave Lee also discussed about it. See, the whole idea of owning the data and monetizing the
Mhm.
it's a B2C concept. It's not B2B. B2B domain, you can generate more value by not owning the data and by giving confidence back that your data is not touched, and you can
Mhm.
actually draw more revenue out of it or more value out of it. See,
Mhm.
people in B2C, how would you monetize a click? I mean, somebody is not paying to click something. So that's why the model is designed of like milking this data in the B2C side. This is not the case when you are looking for B2B. And this is what people miss. See, if you have not worked in a large company or a large industry, you just cannot understand it, that how fiercely the data is protected within the company. And sometimes you will see that 90% of this data is actually pretty useless.
Mm-hmm.
But the insights it can provide at time is, so yeah, it may be useless for you, but somebody else it has a lot of meaning. So I'll give you
Right.
an example. And this is what I discussed earlier as well. So like for example, I mean, when you see company like Merck and Palantir coming together for Syntropy, I mean, what's the pivotal point? I mean, Merck has the data, Merck has the expertise, okay, and it is useless for them. They are not able to use it or extract or work faster than or better than they actually are. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Syntropy at the end of the day is giving them the muscle that Palantir Foundry is providing. That how do we use the Palantir Foundry and our data to create a product? They are not selling data. I mean, Palantir even doesn't own their data. I mean, they are building. So that is so now, for example, if you take the case of Skywise, whatever Airbus has done with the Skywise, and like you mentioned, I mean, it created a valuation of almost $18 billion. If you are getting or creating a valuation of $18 billion for your client without actually owning the data, you really don't want to own the data.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I don't know
Exactly.
too many companies or that even want to like share their data. It's all proprietary stuff, you know. So I
Yeah.
think you hit the nail on the head right there, which is to make sense of data, to make it valuable, it has to be stay internal to the place where it's generating it. I always joke around with some of our network security guys, like, you know, they're always like, oh, what if they hack our information, what if they hack our data? And I was like, really, you think that anyone cares how many homeless people got CAT scans last night, really? And he's like, you never know, you know, that could provide some level of insight into something. And I'm like, I guess, but it's relevant to us because we're trying to create better models of productivity for our staff. But at the same time, it's to be honest, unless you like have the data for all of the hospitals in the entire Northeast and, you know, all the CAT scans that are being done at the current time, it's not going to provide you any real data. It's useful to us, but not useful to anyone else. I mean, we have HIPAA laws that we still have to protect. So of course, we're going to always take network security to another level. But just like I said, it's one of those things that it's always going to be the eye of the beholder, right? How many widgets did company X produce? Really, unless it's a competitor, they don't really care how many widgets you produced, you know. But if that widget is a critical piece in their next product that's going to end up, you know, revolutionizing an industry, then yeah, then that data is relevant. So you're right. I think right now everyone is trying to figure out in terms of like data governance, how to craft, how to basically how to share information in a way that is beneficial to the whole industry without having to give up the proprietary information. And I think that's where hopefully Palantir can really help, because I spoke to some of the people in the industry and they're like, yeah, there's a way that Palantir can work to kind of share data industry wide in a conglomerate format with partners that they have existing relationships with, without giving up the proprietary part of that data that will, you know, pretty much give other people a competitive edge.
Now, I'll give you some examples. Like, I think when you take the case of Google, Facebook, and Amazon, their necessity of data monetization was it came out of that for time. Like they were acquiring this data, they were perfecting their algorithms, and then they said, okay, what we can do, or this data can help advertiser better target the customers. So they were, in that case, they had something and they wanted to monetize it, which is very different. I mean, in case, like for example, in if you see the case of, and I've discussed this example several times. I mean, the deal of BP with Palantir. I mean, BP on based on public sources roughly paid 100 million a year to Palantir, even when the product is being perfected. So you can just imagine that kind of value that BP thought that all the data they have collected that they can actually extract out of this partnership, And the question is whether this partnership is successful. I mean, we can simply judge from the public sources. See, when BP started their partnership with Palantir, oil was $100. BP hasn't made any long-term commitment to pivot towards renewable energy. Now, when BP made the commitment for the renewable energy, they extended the role of Palantir to their green energy initiatives as well. So it is telling that the trust and the confidence that has built over this time, and the value they see in the overall product in general. And they, of course, I mean, since renewable energy and the green energy or low carbon economy, whichever way you want to see it, it is going to be a big market. BP wants to build a strategic positioning, and if they have any risk or they have any concern about data privacy, they would have kicked out Palantir way earlier, and that is not happening.
I think that's
So
another moat as well that Palantir has, is that the fact that they're centered around that data privacy. It's really hard to do data science and AI research with a lot of data without being able to like segment who can see that data and who can't, right? And if you look at Palantir, because of their foundational work with the government, who probably wants more secrecy than any company in the world right now, who have the highest standards of security. It just goes to show you that the platform is built around privacy and security. So I think that moat is going to be very hard to get around. So even a lot of technology companies out there that want to replicate Foundry, they're going to first run into that brick wall that they're going to have to figure out, well, how do we get past data governance before we get to a point where we can apply AI and ML models to different use cases. So that's going to be probably the biggest moat. But the only thing that concerns me in the short term is if Palantir gives companies, especially competitors, because eventually competitors will come around and say, hey, this is a lucrative market. If you let people come through the door, they're going to come through the door, and they're eventually going to, reach out to clients. They're going to create pricing points that will end up driving your margins into the ground. So the question is, Palantir right now really needs to get its foot in through as many doors as possible. And I think they're doing that. They're executing on that. So hopefully we see that in the next few years, and that growth S-curve kind of reflects that.
I guess
that
like
makes sense.
on the question of just Palantir having this kind of uncertainty around it from just the general investing community, one worry I have is like if you look at a company like Facebook, like I feel like Facebook is a company that's very misunderstood in terms of just the value additive that they are for like just the small business community versus how the public perception of Facebook is. And I feel like there's a compression in like Facebook's multiple specifically related to that. So a worry that I have is, okay, what if this idea of Palantir basically just being a spy on your own data never really gets fleshed out? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But if it doesn't, is there some, even though companies themselves know how value additive it is to themselves, like internally, does the market as a whole compress Palantir's price of sales or PE multiple in the future whenever they become like truly profitable? Does it compress its multiple like Facebook's multiple has been compressed, and it doesn't value it accordingly to the rest of big tech? It doesn't have like this kind of pressure, outside like investor pressure, to try to, I guess, change the narrative of it. I mean, I struggle with that. Like, I don't know the answer. I don't think the answer is crystal clear. So it's not going to be one way or the
I
other.
think it's a
I
lot of
agree.
public relations issues with that regard. I mean, right now, when you look at Twitter, you look at any of the social media posts about Facebook, the Cambridge Analytica, that whole fiasco, they're delving into some of their politics. It's kind of that's kind of the same risk that Palantir has too, right? Where you have a lot of geopolitical context that Palantir is involved in. And even if you look at some of the congressional hearings, people were asking Mark Zuckerberg about Palantir. It was like, what? Like, so the question is, is there a way that Palantir can get away from the perception of being that like that black box data analytical company that figured out how to, kill people using drones, right? I think that's going to be a big challenge. They really need to do a really deep PR blitz and basically change that perception. Because otherwise what's going to happen is not only are you not going to get, and especially in a world right now of ESG, right? a lot of companies may not be willing to invest in that company because they feel like there's not a lot of areas where Palantir is doing much in terms of ESG. And then also at the same time, a lot of companies may not be willing to work with them because of a perceived reputation that may not exist, right? And I don't think it exists. I don't think that they do nearly half the things that people say they do. So, but I agree. I think because of
It's a risk.
that, their valuations are going to be compressed a little.
No, I agree. I mean, it's a risk, and I'll be honest. Like, I mean, this whole idea. I'm an ESG advisor to a fund, so I mean, and this is like something I deal on day-to-day basis, and this is why I mean I was discussing earlier as well. I think people also need to realize that as of today, the whole idea of ESG and what the definition of ESG, especially in the S part and G part, is pretty much governed by the Western institutions and liberal institutions in general. I mean, trust me, like when I'm going to talk to my clients in countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, for them, what does it mean for socially sustainable? Okay, is in a lot of cases it's different. I mean, companies which do not protect and help government, in my view, are bad ESG. Now, if you take the Silicon Valley approach, companies who work with government, they are bad in ESG. I mean, it's entirely different. The question is who is right. I mean, they have the power, they have the might, they can decide on that part. In my view, it's very irresponsible for someone not to work for the society they come. I mean, the institution you are part of. I cannot comprehend that kind of thinking. Because see, what history has taught us, if everyone is thinking and everyone has an opinion, that all this kind of mentality and the thought process that is happening in Silicon Valley is just the discussion of intellect, I think they are making fool of themselves. See, there are always people, there are always forces that works in shadow, and people see what kind of group and what kind of hordes are building. They just embed their thinking and they promote some of the elements at a key pivotal points so that they can actually create unrest and they can actually divide society. So if Silicon Valley is thinking that there are people which are not embedded within Silicon Valley just to take advantage of it, I think that's a fool's errand. So this is where I mean I disagree with this idea, and it has been promoted by a lot of academic institutes, and this is where I mean like a lot of time I find that I'm in no camp because I'm neither in here and neither there, but I believe there are some people who are like me. See, when you see like for example nowadays you see what happened with the Joe Rogan podcast issue. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean you can go and you can actually fight on all the statements he has made based on science, but people are literally trying to silence him. I mean, isn't it that's what the medieval and the black era before Renaissance was, that people will tell you to believe everything just the way you are. Okay, I mean, yes, people, I mean, and one of the things I liked about US and a lot, and people may used to make fun of it, but I always liked it. I always found that even during the peace times, US always had this kind of group of people who have these conspiracy theories. And sometimes you think like, how are these people allowed to do it? But that's the strength in the US. And when looking back like some 10, 20, 30 years, you actually find that some of these conspiracy theories were not that bad actually. Okay, I
I
mean they were
mean,
not entirely right, and so see, you cannot lose the essence of it. People, US is a country which will always be on the target of many nations for different strategic and political and security reasons. So assuming that these countries and these people have not embedded their people in your society to actually make situation worse, if you believe in that, if somebody believes in that, good luck with them.
I would say one thing, I think, and this is what I've been gauging myself. I think it's changing. I think right now they kicked the thing too hard. They kicked that tire too hard, right? Cancel culture went way too far. That now you're
It
trying to
really
cancel
did.
people that are super liberal, right?
Mhm.
Like Joe Rogan is not a far right like extremist. Like a lot of people want to paint him as such, but dude, if the barometer of Joe Rogan is like, oh, that's the far right, then you're done. Then there is nothing at that point that you can do to be a liberal. So I think right now they've kicked the tire too hard, and now they're gonna feel. And that's the other thing. There's so many people on on Twitter right now, just pretty much supporting Joe Rogan. People are signing up to Spotify. There's so many people that are like, oh, I'm canceling my Spotify. But there's probably 5 times as many posts saying, you know what, just to support freedom of speech, I'm going to subscribe to Spotify. The US is based on this concept of a counterculture, right? Like if a lot of people are saying to you, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, dude, I tell you right now, that's the one beauty of America, that will challenge you, even if it's like the most like obvious fact. For some reason, we have the freedom to challenge it. I mean, you guys remember the guy who thought the earth was flat, so he built his own rocket to like go to, like to check it for himself. Which other country could you possibly do something as dumb, but we can. That's the beauty of America. Do I agree with it? No. But at the same time, just the fact that the guy has the ability to do it is worth something, right? And that's the free thinking, I think, that gives the US the ability to create new products and new softwares and new technologies where you're not scared to speak your mind, you're not scared to fail, you're not scared to pretty much to fail. You're allowed to fail. That's I think the key in the US that gives us a lot of strength. But I think right now, I agree. Like the whole Joe Rogan thing, I think that's woken up a lot of people, even on the very liberal side. They're like, I think we've gone too far, and I think we need to reevaluate how we're doing things. And with regards to ESG, I think that's also changing, because I've seen a lot of posts that have basically been challenging a lot of dogma around ESG, to just go from, hey, is something really that we're doing to really make the world better, or is this just another layer of organization that's just out there to try to raise more money towards a perceived noble cause, right? And like I said, it's one of those things that we're going to see, and I think some of the areas might change over the next 10 years. Let's see.
Sebastian, you live in LA. Okay, you are right in the middle of, I would say, a lot of it we are discussing, right in the middle of that kind of discussion. I'm pretty sure that you have seen this discussion much more often in your society, in your circles. What do you think in general? Like, what's happening in LA overall? Is it helping LA to prosper, or is it kind of dooming LA? Because there are both kind of people who thinks LA is actually being dragged back with some of the thinking and the politics that is ongoing. What do you think?
I mean, I guess my view, it could be a little contrarian, but I feel like just to preface, America is obviously like the software capital of the world, just in general. Like what we deliver, the product we deliver, and the execution we have is nothing short of incredible. But sometimes I feel like the views that are put out there somewhat hinder. I guess I would lean to the point where it's almost like it's stagnating growth, simply because people just they get caught up in this box of thinking like there's only one way, one path to go down. It's only this is the path, this is what's right, and maybe it is, but I guess it's hard to say, because you see some ideas and you just disagree with them. You just strongly disagree with them. But that's the beauty of America, is everybody has a different view, and I guess our job is to respect that view, which I admit, like, I sometimes trouble doing. But at the same time, the reason why I fear it a little bit is because sometimes views that are counter to maybe what we think is right, or what is actually right, can be counterproductive. And maybe we're starting to see that. I mean, like, for example, like California's population is, like, for the first time, is going to see a decrease, and maybe that's attributed to other factors, just from like political views. But I mean, it could come down to the fact that maybe there's just so much of this dogma put out there, where people are almost not forced to believe one thing, but they're going down this path that maybe a lot of other people are thinking. It's like almost like a herd mentality, and I don't know. I worry that it stagnates growth, because so many people have this like similar type of view. But America's obviously proven time and time again that we overcome a lot of different difficulties and challenges.
I think one of the great things about Palantir is that they early on they realized that, right? And so
Right.
that's why they've started to distance themselves away from that and to
Mm.
say, look, if we stay in an echo chamber, our products are going to reflect that echo chamber, and
Right.
that's all we're and going to end up doing is serving a pretty much a product that's not revolutionary. So by kind of moving out a little bit, moving their headquarters to Denver, moving a lot of their work is actually done out of New York, you know. So I think overall Palantir and Alex Karp and the team, they realized that, you know what, we have to distance ourselves. And I think a lot of Silicon Valley companies, especially the ones that really want to innovate, they're saying, you know what, there are other places in the country where there are top talent that's begging to go. Like Austin is a great another hub that's like really
Right.
developing. Snowflake moved their headquarters to Bozeman, Montana. You know, so there's like I said, there's a tremendous amount of pressure right now, even from the tech side, to say, look, we don't want to be in just one area. Granted, I don't think Silicon Valley is going anywhere. I think they're still going to constantly grow. There's a lot of incumbent companies there that kind of support the local economy to no ends, right? But at some point, people are going to say, what is the quality of life that I'm going to get by living in a city that's pretty much like, if you're not at the upper echelons or at the bottom echelons where you're pretty much getting everything handed to you, where do we fit in the middle? And I think once that middle leaves, it's going to be a big tragedy for California. But I mean, just to touch back with Palantir, I think they are a forward-thinking company. They realize these things, and they're not afraid to make the moves that they need to. Would they have recruited top tier talent in California, which was where most top tier talent tends to go in the software side? Yes, but New York, Austin, and some of the other parts of the country are becoming a lot more attractive to people that are saying, you know what, I kind of want to be out of just that California bubble, you know, of everyone just being a tech entrepreneur, you know, or a tech worker, and see what's out there. So, yeah.
And two, like, I guess an attractive point to Palantir is if your salary is a lot in stock-based comp, then maybe people are attracted because they see that upside is greater than at just general Silicon Valley big tech. Because while we may have our qualms about stock-based comp, and if it's like being more dilutive as share price comes down, so obviously as share price goes up, you're issuing the same amount of shares to issuing less shares to pay like the same amount of value in salary to an employee. But like if an employee wants to come work with Palantir, maybe they see it as, well, there's more upside in my equity, even though maybe I don't know what their salaries are relative to just general big tech, but maybe they see it as more of an equity upside, and they'll also come to Palantir for that additional, I guess, bigger payday down the line.
Yeah, I think total compensation in California, you need to make at least 200, maybe 300K just to survive right now. So
Yeah.
the thing is, like, okay, you want to attract new grads. I don't think you can attract a new grad without paying them 200, 300K, and you're risking a lot to do that. Palantir's like, no, you know what? Let's get out there. Let's expand out. But
This is why I wanted to engage in this discussion, even though it looks segue. I mean, the reason I indulge in discussion because I had a viewpoint that Palantir right from the starting had the strength to make an opinion and to work towards it. And if it requires them to go against the popular opinion, I think they had the courage to do it. Many people will dislike it because what they are doing is not popular opinion. And a lot of these tech companies and a lot of the popular people in Silicon Valley, actually now they are coming to a point where they are become more a totalitarian, that you do as we say. You invest in your company only if you follow this. And I'm telling you, like, this is why I say that people like me from the corporate circles, they don't come out and they don't talk. I'll tell you, like, I was in discussions where company is trying to do, okay, we need to improve our ESG profile, so what we should do. So the low hanging fruits for improving ESG profile that time, oh, let's straight away create some LGBTQ movement, some sponsorship, and let's support social movements like Black Lives Matter. The thing is, they were not doing it genuinely. Okay, the idea was they were not making. Their idea was to create a PR around it. Their idea was not to actually go and introspect that what is the purpose of your company, what you actually stand for. And I think this is very different in case of Palantir. My view is that society as we are living, it will change. And Palantir has already taken a position, which side and what kind of route they are going to take. And this is very different from a lot of these companies in tech. I mean, not everyone, but there's a lot of these companies in tech which are still like headless chicken, which they just copy paste what other big giants are doing in their sector. So whenever this showdown happens, I mean, a lot of companies will be decimated. And I think whether Palantir succeed in it, we don't know that part yet. I mean, that's a risk. And like Sebastian and Kris said, I mean, it is a risk that will stay on Palantir because they are connected. We like it, we don't like it. They are connected with a view of society. Okay, that view of society has to succeed in a certain aspect before we see the company. I mean, company can grow. I mean, company can grow 200 billion, 500 billion, 1 trillion, 3 trillion, 10 trillion. That's a different story. But the idea is like the society aspect. I mean, because they are very clear what their civil values are, what their stand on freedom of speech, what their stand on helping defense and government institution. It is very different from just going and somebody doing a smooth talk or I mean, you say a lot of things. We saw recently the guy from White House administration came to CNBC to talk about. The question was asked about Tesla, and the guy spoke for like a puppet for some time without actually mentioning anything on Tesla. So this is what we need to understand. I mean, you cannot make big fool of people. Society is built on individuals. Society is built on opinions. Okay, people do realize it, and history is evident for it. And Palantir has a position for it. Whether that position succeed, it has a very big role that how society evolves in general as well. Okay, back to
And
you
that
guys.
creates a market. I feel like that's one of the big things that creates a market and creates opportunity. Because
And
you have
also,
people. Go ahead, Kris.
no, also talent. Like, not every software engineer, there are tons of software engineers right now that are white males, right? And right now, if you every day you walk into the office and they're like, you're the problem, you're the problem. You really think they're going to want to stay in that kind of environment? They're going to want to they're going to want to branch out, go to somewhere else, go to another company. So I'm not just saying, I think at some point we definitely need more diversity initiatives in the tech industry, but not at the point of like a knife point or a gun point where you're forcing diversity down, or you're making decisions at the higher levels to say, look, we're going to make hiring decisions based on the lens of race. I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to get a job out competing someone just because I'm of a different race. That's not how I want to do it, based on my own merits, right? And that's the key right there. And that hopefully that message relates and translates. Go ahead, Sachin.
So I would spill a story now. So this is a discussion I was having with someone who is next to CEO, large company, very large company. And I was trying to tell them that, so they are a legacy company. And I was trying to tell them that you are actually more diverse than big tech. And they said, no, I mean, like I said, you have people coming from 100 different countries. I mean, you have manufacturing plants in areas where nobody has. Okay, you sponsor universities which people don't know. I said, that's very different from what big tech does. So you need to see the real diversity in a lot of these companies to actually see the colleges the people come from. And the moment you start going beyond the gender, the race, you will see that at the end of the day, there are actually very few colleges which are actually contributing the top echelons of a lot of these companies. So how you define the diversity is actually matters. Like, I mean, I work for Schlumberger. Okay, I mean, extremely proud. I work for BCG. I mean, a lot of diversity. I mean, from that point of view. And I met other companies who claimed a lot of diversity. Like, for example, one company I met, and they said, "Oh, we are one of the most diverse companies." I said, "How do you rate diversity? I mean, you are 90% actually one nationality only." They said, "No. Diversity for us is that how the race is, what's the proportion of race within the." I said, "But isn't nationality is also a diversity dimension?" Okay, so that is one of the things. Like like Kris and Sebastian, you mentioned, is the definition of diversity has to be more inclusive. I mean, it cannot be like this, that you bring people together, but then you put knife in hand of them to point to each other. Yeah, I think that's not what a society would like to have.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
So Sebastian, like now we discuss about the social context, and I mean, this is an endless discussion. Okay, like how society thinks. Now this is a baggage, or You can say this is an armor, whichever way you look at it. I mean, it could be a baggage for Palantir, it could be an armor for Palantir in this debate. But at least at this particular point, it is a fair statement to say that it is dragging the valuation down.
Mhm.
Okay, and it can drag a valuation down for a very long time. Okay, so let's take that view of dragging valuation down and let's try to build a bear case. And guys, we will not share any Excel here, we will not share any slide here, we just want to verbalize it so that everybody can understand. Is Palantir today has a valuation of around 23-24 billion dollar. They have a revenue of 1.5 billion. Okay, they have literally zero to no cash. Their business model is straight away focused on the large legacy companies where the most of the revenue is coming. They have opened channels in foundry for builders, in SPAC investment, which are likely to create revenue for future. What is the road? Because we discussed this 30% growth can lead them to around 16-20 billion revenue. Where this extra revenue is going to come, like how the stepwise it's going to happen, and given the baggage and the armor we discussed that it is going to stay at least in this decade for them. So tell me, Sebastian, I mean, where do you think this new revenue will come from?
I mean, I guess going back to what like Carpet said during his last interview, and this is where this is where I have some trouble. So he had said that Foundry is a very thick product. So in order to truly monetize it, where I think this 30% plus growth is going to come from, you have to slice it into different layers. And Sachin, you wrote a beautiful article on this where you said, like, in the context of a company, if you compare it to like a Snowflake or a Databricks, they're working particularly within one layer, versus Palantir is trying to be all encompassing. But in order to truly see this kind of exponential growth, you need to be able to service companies at individual layers. And that's what he's talking about when he's saying we need to take a thick product like Foundry and make it thin enough to be monetizable, where the other guys need to worry about being thick enough to be valuable. So that's where this 30+% growth is going to come from if they can actually make their products thin enough to be monetizable like Foundry. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. If you're going to do that, then that's going to create competition with Snowflake. They always reiterate their competition is mainly with their own customers, because their own customers think that they can build an internal, like Kris, you were mentioning earlier, like within the healthcare space, you think that you can build an internal system that's cheaper, more cost effective than just doing it with Palantir, and you can still get the value add. Versus Palantir is trying to tell you, no, we can be value added by saving you time plus being more efficient. But the problem is, if you're going to be trying to compete in this thinner layer, then you're going to go match up against like the companies like Snowflake or Databricks. Now you have true competition outside of just your customers. So yes, you're going to try to grow your top line, but then that's going to come back to you a little bit with maybe some offsetting challenges from the competition side. And I don't know how that competitive pressure is going to shake out. That's what, like, I guess just in my mind, I always just try to stick with, as an investor, say, okay, if they guide for an excess of 30% revenue growth, I'm going to say that they maybe are not sandbagging that and just pare that back and just say, in a base case, they're only growing at like 30%, like each year, which is still a lot, but that encompasses the fact that they're going to have to make their product Foundry thin enough to be monetizable. It's just going to come with some competitive headwinds.
So it's fair to say they still have a burden of proof to demonstrate
Yes.
that
Yes.
how this revenue is going to meaningfully expand, because it is fair to say that this 30% is not going to come entirely from the existing category and existing revenue streams or the products they have. They need to add new products and offerings and new kind of clients. So we need to see those evidence as we move around quarter to quarter before we agree that they will they will maintain 30% year on year, if not exceed to 60 or 80% as we expect them to be. But that's pretty much the kind of evidence we should look for. Kris, what do you think, man?
No, I totally agree with you. I think right now, for me, I try, whenever I do any modeling on my own, I try to basically say, okay, what is the company projecting out, right? Most of the time, especially if you're a data analytics player, you're selling a product that's literally based on data analytics and you're projecting something out. That means that you probably have some math that shows that you have the ability to grow at a 30%. And if you fail at that, that's going to be really bad, because that's going to say, well, you couldn't even project out your own future revenues. How can we expect to trust you with our data to give us that? So I think to just piggyback on that, I think that 30% growth rate is a base case. I do see the potential for them to be able to get to a 60% growth rate. But the one thing that's been concerning me is and this shouldn't necessarily be like a bad thing, but essentially some of their investments in some of their SPACs and moving into down market categories. By moving into down market categories, some people feel like, oh, that's business expansion. And to me, it's like, no, that means that you don't have that many bigger clients getting involved with you at a
Tapping
pace
out.
that you would like.
Tapping out.
Yeah. So that means, well, I wouldn't say tapping out. I would just say that they are pretty much signaling to the market like, hey, we're having a tough time getting these Fortune 500 companies to adopt us, and that's the key, right? If you don't have the adoption for the Fortune 500, you're going to have to push down market. And if you do push down market, you're not going to see the growth trajectories that we would essentially like to see. Like you would need like literally like 100, maybe 200, 300 different like early stage companies to be with you to see that kind of growth that we're saying. And they fail at a 90% rate. Like, dude, startups, as much as I would like a lot of these startups to 10x, 100x, 1000x at one point in their life, and Palantir being a small investor and that equity stake growing to a huge amount, I don't think 90% of them are going to be even around in 5 years, right? So with that in mind, to have Palantir kind of like put them, they're literally taking a big risk in getting themselves involved in a lot of these SPAC deals, because on one hand, you're not just risking a little bit of capital up front, but you're risking reputation too, because if this company was using Palantir and it fails,
that's true. I didn't think about that before.
So yeah.
I guess pushing back Kris and Sachin, like it seems like you guys have this view where it's possible that Palantir reaches 60 to 80% revenue growth. How do you arrive at those type of figures? Like, what do you see is the pathway for Palantir to be able to achieve that kind of growth rate? That's what I struggle with that.
I would say that they have to get into a position where they end up becoming a default player in an industry or in a category of business operations. So an example is 30 years ago, there was no such thing as CRM. CRM wasn't even a category that people thought about, right? ERP 40 years ago was like a joke. Like, everyone just had different teams working on things and they would just, like use pneumatic systems to send each other information. But when these new categories came around, they were able to radically transform business, right? So I think right now, Palantir is working to basically, and just between me and you, I think they're trying to kill ERP and CRM eventually, to the point where they're so integrated that you don't need to have the Salesforces of the world or the Oracles of the world, provide these legacy platforms that are horrible. Like if you've ever worked with an ERP system, just ask around in your industry. Just be like, hey, can you tell me about ERP and like one of the, like what are some of the things that are good about it? And they'll be like, don't talk to me. I hate ERP. Like I hate the ERP plan. Like most of them are 20-year-old technologies that literally they've just been piling new shit on top of it and saying, look, it's a brand new product. Oh, look, it's got a new user interface. That's a brand new product. CRM, on the other hand, has developed like a lot, and Salesforce should be given a lot of credit for it. But legacy ERP is literally just a cash cow for Oracle that they've been milking for the last 20 years. And same thing with so many of these other ERP providers. They're all just milking these organizations, not providing the real value that you would necessarily want to see. So I think Palantir right now is creating an entirely new category for themselves. And I think eventually it's going to be one of those things that if they get a dominant share of that market, they're going to be able to like do really well, because it's going to be, you need to have Palantir Foundry or a Palantir Foundry like service that your organization has. Otherwise, you're kind of like you're behind the curve,
Right.
And then once, like I said, I think 30, 40 years ago, no one thought of ERP as a thing that they would need. Now, if you're an organization, you don't have an ERP system, you're dead. Like you're not going to survive, So it's the same thing.
So let me give you my take that why I still believe that Palantir can actually rake revenues like 60 to 80%. And I have to say it, I need to ensure that I don't breach any of my NDA while sharing some of my insights here. Uh, See, we know what Palantir is doing as of today in terms of government, in terms of, and that is pretty much already giving something like 30%. Okay, I mean above that. See, Palantir, for example, if you take, they need to make very focused products to do that. Okay, and there are some hints. So, for example, whole world and all of the indexes and all of the regulator, everybody is going towards net zero. Net
Mm.
zero 2050 is a data problem today. You need to understand what is your carbon footprint today. Okay. You need to understand how your regulator is going to ask your data from you. You need to understand what is the carbon footprint of your supply chain. Okay. Now, are your suppliers going to share the data which can be used for, I mean, other business intelligence? This is a very shady roads we are going on. You need solutions that give people confidence that it can be done. Now we are talking, like, even in the last COP26, the business and the assets worth 130 trillion committed that okay, we need to embrace for net zero 2050, and that is what people don't understand. What does that mean on the ground? And I'm dealing this on day-to-day basis with my clients and the regulators I work with. See, you are doing a business. That business includes 20 activities, and you say, if I'm going to make it net zero, I'm going to spend this much money on these activities. Some of the activities actually create less revenue than the money you are going to invest on them to decarbonize them. The business as a whole is going to disrupt how you carry your supply chain from where it works out. So somebody needs to understand the data problem first. Somebody needs to understand what kind of disruptions are going to, and this is not a business problem, it's a compliance problem as of today. That means if you fail to report, how do you know your pollution? Polluters report their pollutions themselves, that we are polluting this much. Now, tomorrow, if regulator goes and want to say, okay, I want to see actually how much you are polluting, show me your data. So regulators don't have that much resources as of today. Polluters don't understand. I mean, everybody talks big thing about net zero 2050. Okay, and I'll cover it sometime in different about whole climate transition thing part. But the reality is, it is a data problem, and it is a data problem that is going to disrupt a business that is more than 130 trillion in coming days. So, in order to understand the impact of that, industry and governments around the world are going to at least spend 1 to 3 trillion just to understand during this decade. What will you remove if you don't know what your exposure is? So this is like the kind of one of the market. Same thing happens in terms of crypto. Now, crypto has different thoughts. People think it's a Ponzi scheme. People think it's the money to the future that will take to the Mars, and so many other things. The question is, whatever it is, it has a large infrastructure. It has a large checks and balance. Okay. And society and governments and regulators are at the brink of it, whether to adopt it, reject it, cancel it, ban it. The question is, whatever frame you take, crypto is not going to away. Like, for example, countries like India and China has banned it. But has anything happened? Like, crypto will stay in some form, the technology will stay in some form. So the question is, you need products to manage it. The most important reason I think Palantir can create values like 60 to 80%, and I just cannot reveal how I know this, but let me just try to simplify it. See, take the case of Centropy and take the case of Skywise. They actually created products where client has bundled a lot of data in a context and a service for somebody who can actually get it and actually remove a lot of effort and internal analysis they were doing. They are making their life easy. And this is what Palantir can do that a lot of other companies cannot do. In other companies, to actually build something like that, almost 20 people have to, or 20 brands have to come together. And Palantir has to focus on it, that they need to work with clients to create products for their clients. As long as they're focusing, I'm hiring Palantir, and Palantir will do all my enterprise, whatever is happening. That's not the only thing Palantir does. Palantir can help you to create new business lines, new products for. So if Palantir fails to build that kind of prowess with their existing clients, they will fail to do it the 60%. If they manage to do it, okay, that changes the game because everyone else has to follow it. See, for example, like if you are saying that Palantir has made a partnership with Merck. So Merck will do a partnership with Palantir, then they will have some sort of exclusivity agreement. And now in order to have that kind of exclusivity agreement, they need to give preferred terms to Palantir, which is in a simple way like cream dollars. The question is, once you are in that kind of marriage, you need to ensure that your competitive advantage is going to stay way above the market. Only then this kind of alliance can succeed. And if it succeeds, that means you literally wipe away a lot of companies and their market share. Okay. So they are betting, and you can only do this if you have a product that has that kind of prowess, if you have that kind of brand and understanding of industrial and a B2B domain. So it needs razor precise execution. And this is where I say that execution is one of the biggest risk on Palantir. Okay, because what we are talking here is a big stake game. So for example, like the kind of work they are doing with the Hyundai oil bank or the Hyundai heavy asset industries. The question is, you have this database, and I said that databases are useless until and unless you make something out of it. So who is going to, the company need to understand, their clients want to understand. Like a lot of time I get to, so for example, like there was one incident, I was working with this company and they wanted to evaluate Snowflake, Palantir, and they said, oh, we have this 6 months evaluation cycle, we'll do this, we'll have this meeting, we'll judge them on this metrics, blah blah blah. I said, why are you doing this? Just talk to them, all of these companies, and say, we put our people, you put your people, in 6 weeks we create a product that you cannot create with your knowledge and your tools in 6 weeks, and we also cannot create. That particular time at 6 weeks, we see that this product is good enough to be launched at standalone or not. If it is, take another 2 weeks to see the branding and marketing. In the third month, just launch it and let market response to it for another 3 months to see that whether they have a value for it. Why spend 6 months in just coming up a decision whether you want to engage them or don't engage them? And don't, do with them, do with any company you want to do it. Why we are wasting time in a traditional ways? And what happened on that company, what happened on that product, I cannot reveal that part. Whether they reach Palantir or other these companies, that is out of the discussion. Thing is that is the kind of concept. And people today in management are getting very uneasy about it, because a lot of these people are actually carrying a lot of failures on their balance sheet because of misfired digital transformation. Nobody talks about it because everybody is a part of a sim, and they fuzz the numbers, they fuzz the slides to look everything. Everything is not rosy in terms of digital transformation. There is blood on the road. People don't want to put their faces on the slides. Okay. And that is why a lot of things are under wrap. And my bad is it will change. This blood will not go unnoticed. People will eventually get bored of it and fatigued of it. And they say, enough is enough. I want a product that works and that delivers value. So this is why I'm very much against when we talk about like do it yourself solutions a lot of time. See, even if you make a solution to work, it still cannot compete the best in the industry. Okay, you need to focus your people, your energy in the core business problems that you are solving for your clients. And that is where I eventually, this is one of the reasons I believe that Palantir is a good company that is growing at a 30 and 40% rate, but it can be a great company if it can unlock this barrier to achieve this kind of success. Okay, back to you guys.
I would say one question, Sebastian, just a question. And maybe, you want to take some time later on, you can. What if they end up at a 50% growth rate? Not consistently, but on average. What does that valuation look like? What was that, the Super Bowl case, or was it the bull case on your part?
I don't even have that in a model where I look at 50%, just because I felt like personally I didn't know if that was achievable. But if I ran the numbers, I can probably pull it up here on my end. If I just put in like a 50% revenue growth case, and I'm assuming like a 40% margin. Let's see what we spit out here.
The reason why I say that is because I never thought Tesla could hit the 60% growth rate that it did. Okay. I just didn't think it was possible. But guess what? Once you have a dynamic leader that's there, you have a product that everyone likes, and you hit that inflection point where you're no longer focusing on selling, you're focusing on just implementing. And I think Palantir is about maybe 2-3 years away. I think if things play out right in the next 3 years, they're not going to have to hire a sales team. At that point, people are just going to say, hey, when are you guys coming to, help us with this digital transformation, right? But that's a very big if. But if it does hit that growth curve, Palantir could hit $1 trillion very quickly.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
So that's going to be the thing.
I mean, if you're talking a 50% growth rate, I mean, you're looking at like 60 billion in revenue in like 2030. I mean, you could put whatever you want as a multiple on that, but I mean, like if you just call it like 20 times. So if you call it like, I mean, I'm just thinking like kind of like pretty arbitrary here, but if you're saying like 60 billion on the top line in 10 years, I mean, I don't know if that's just saying that number just seems a little impossible, but
I used to think the same thing with Tesla. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't a Tesla bear, but I was not a Tesla believer for a long time because I literally read right into the CNBC articles, right into the bears. Well, not the bears, but like the people that said, you cannot do this. It is not possible. There's an
analogy.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think a lot of times when you're looking at it from like just a financial analyst point of view, and even someone who's been in the markets for too long, you have this bias that you just think it'll never happen, right? And you eventually just and that's the thing. It happens to all of us. So right now, I think it's executable. I think they could hit a 40-50% growth target, if they play their cards. I mean, Sachin apparently thinks that they are going to get there. So seeing how like confident Sachin is giving me a little bit of confidence. I might go buy some more shares tomorrow morning, man. I was holding off, but I might just like put a limit order in right now.
That was some numbers in my model. I mean, I have not shared my model. I think there are reasons for that. I will share it at some point of time because I just want to ensure that I do not reveal any of my. Just want to be clear that I don't reveal any of my NDA thing. So if I put some sort of 50%, and of course, I have divided Palantir future in terms of different products, different revenue lines, and some has to come.
By foundries for builders and then etc. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I have like for something for Gotham, something for Foundry. And I also have view on some of the upcoming products, that what could be the upcoming products will look like. Okay, and it's, to be honest, it's not that difficult to figure out. Like if you listen the industry leaders to understand what problems are, and you try to understand what the data aspect of it, you pretty much know what kind of data product will come from companies related to that. Like for example, we saw that crypto was coming up, and net 2050 was coming up. People realized, okay, you need some carbon management, you need some sort of a crypto management and things like that. So I see Palantir, okay, see, the product is done, that part is done, okay. I mean, like in next 10 years, you believe or you don't believe, the product is only going to change and improve on incremental basis, because they always say that we have built a product that people will only realize 5 years down the line that how useful it is. Okay, that means most of their effort is actually going to spend on the marketing, advertising, PR, sales, and all that. Now, this is a software business. This is a sticky business. That means if they manage to deliver it and they get to 50% plus, the margins are going to be super high.
Yeah.
Okay.
Above 40%.
And this is something when the company grows, so what will happen, what we are not accounting for, is that ecosystem that comes around it will also become more and more. We saw like how IBM came, AWS came. What do you think will happen when Palantir is generating a revenue of nearly $60 billion? They will increase exposure. I mean, this is what I say, like to think like in terms of strategically, Microsoft will want to have more, because what is happening, that means if they are doing 50%, that means they are exceeding in their solution delivery above a lot of people in big tech and other companies, because it's either you take this dollar or they take the dollar. So that means a lot of these, and so the sales force effect, the networking effect will be exponential. Now think about this: you are in the mining sector, and you are saying two companies are doing much better than the peers and they are using Foundry. What option do you have?
Yeah.
So that is what I call, this is what I call like a snowball moment and a momentum effect. So based on my model, I see that the free cash flow in that particular time is going to look like somewhere around $25 billion if they manage to, because they will also change how the company is structured and how the people are compensated. Okay, it's not going to. So in that particular aspect, it is a model that is very similar to Amazon, but you are going to have a very high operating margin because the kind of volume Amazon has to churn to create that kind of revenue, that's not the situation for Palantir. They don't need to deal with physical supply chain in general. And even 10 years down the line, we will still be uh, on set of big data, because we had just started scratching surfaces, learning that what you can do with business models when you have access to that kind of data. When I look in terms of big data OS today, and I made a statement before, I see everyone somewhere at the end of 1950 and 1960, and people are thinking, okay, what else you can do with semiconductors and transistor? Everyone knows the utility. People haven't realized entirely. Like for example, when the smartphone came, and I mean, people think, yeah, it's nice. I mean, I remember 2007 playing with my friend's iPhone. I mean, it looks nice, it can do things, but it's a phone. And in 2009, I remember like when Angry Birds came and that became a thing, people were first time thinking, is phone gaming
Oh,
going to be a thing?
Angry Birds.
And think about this, based on what happened. I mean, you have Candy Crush, you have Fortnite. Today, phone gaming actually has created a lot of value. So that's what I say, that people need to understand that how the ripple events work. When something works, it is always going to multiply a lot,
Mm.
or it is not going to multiply. So let me put it now in a more discrete way. Either Palantir will fail to create consistent 30% growth over this decade, or Palantir is going to create a growth which is going to be more than 60% over this decade, especially in the later part. I find it very difficult that Palantir will stay in between. Either it's going to become a very niche company where it does reasonably well and it grows well, or it's going to completely sweep. There is no middle ground, I see, and this is why I
But
mean,
isn't that what Karp says himself? Like I get Karp could also be wrong and very underestimate the company himself. But isn't this Karp's view? Like Karp's view is like a 35% grower over the next, I'm assuming, a decade. So I guess if he's trying to run a mental check in his head, I feel like he doesn't see that. I feel like he doesn't see 60% growth as a possibility. Maybe he does, and maybe he just doesn't tell us. But it seems like there's a stark contrast versus obviously what management displays on their calls with conservative 30% and excess growth versus Karp saying, okay, we can be 10, 20 times larger. But that still is like, I mean, that's 30, that's like 35% growth versus 60% just doesn't, like, at least from what I take from Karp, maybe you guys have a different view. Maybe that's just where I think he's maybe thinking that's a ceiling for them. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. But I mean, I guess that's where I push back on what he calls about.
so this is why I maintained for a very long time that one of the biggest risks I have in Palantir is the self-constraint they have put on themselves. And I say it again and again, that Palantir growth is self-constrained, Snowflake growth is market constrained. And the reason for that is, this is why I say that people need to understand that they have come their products very recently in terms, but they are a 17-year-old company. And you like it, you don't like it. I mean, this is a subconscious bias that happens, that if you have spent time over a time and you have seen growth, your mind has already anchored on few things. If 1 year you do 40%, it is better than anything you have done in the last 17 years. That's success for you. But that's not ceiling. But your mind is anchored to that. You did 40%, everybody had a good component of SBCs, everybody enjoyed, and what your mind is telling you, 40% is good number. But your mind is not telling you that you are doing 40%, but you can actually do 200%. This is where, I mean, I believe that this is why I said they need to just unleash their sales force. Okay, they just not need to hire people. They need to, yeah, they have a focus on their culture and everything. But when you are bringing more people from outside, your culture has to adapt also, because these people know things and they work in a certain way that can actually contribute to the mission you are actually trying to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
If you are too constricted, about like how you deal and how you do things, you are constraining yourself. And this is why I say that Palantir growth is self-constrained. They are only able to grow as much they are about to change and utilize their resources. And this is one of the biggest execution risks. So for example, if Palantir maintains 30-35% growth over this decade, in my opinion, they fail to realize their potential.
Mhm. I'd agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I'd
agree.
agree.
I agree.
I agree. I got to get going here, Sachin, but I probably have time for like one last question.
Tell me.
If anything was on your mind, or you
I
two.
have one. I have one thing to ask. Like, I mean, your community is mostly people coming from investment community, even if it is private. Like, what do their take on Palantir? What do people in your like your business community and the people you work around? What do they think of Palantir overall?
I think it's a pretty mixed bag, to be honest. Like I wouldn't say it's like one way or the other. I mean, I guess if you try to contextualize their potential, they see it, but then they struggle to get just okay, that sounds great. Basically, it's like almost like a response where okay, that sounds great. You know, that's the potential of the company, but let's see it. It's more of a prove it to me approach, and I think that's like almost indicative of the rest of the street in a lot of views. I mean, it's hard for me just as a general. If I'm trying to value something, I can't put to paper something that I'm not almost certain of that I can't like. Maybe we could find a way to like, for example, like if you believed in 60% growth, I feel like as a Wall Street analyst, just in general, just as not just as, again like just speaking from like an investor perspective, um, not from like someone who actually like, just works in the bank, but Wall Street in general, I feel like sometimes they struggle to put something to paper that they don't like, I guess, fully see into the future. So if it's not very clear to them, like this is like perfectly why like Tesla stock would fall by I think I felt like 20% or 15% after earnings because it's hard for the street to contextualize 50% growth year over year if they don't lay out a plan for such growth. Yes, they could say in their guidance, yes, we're planning to grow 50% over 50% on average year over year. But if I'm just a general Wall Street analyst and I'm saying, okay, well, that's great. How are you going to get there? Take me through it. So yeah, you have four factories. You're ramping up Fremont. You're ramping up Shanghai. You those two are like basically like still have more room to go. Then you have like Berlin and Austin, but Berlin only has one line. I mean, they could expand that to two, but that takes time. And then Austin's ramping up. So you have to say, okay, like if you look at the context of how like Shanghai ramped up, and I'm a Wall Street analyst, I'm trying to say, I just can't see right now, like how are you going to reach like 50% growth, which like, I mean, my internal target is like at least 5 million deliveries, like unit deliveries in 2025. Sometimes I have trouble seeing that going to pan out. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. I mean, that's going to happen. That 5 million deliveries is going to happen by 2025. That became a little less uncertain after the call. So I can see like fears of growth because you struggle to put something on paper that leads you to a destination. So if you can't find a way and say like your example of getting to net zero emissions by 2050 and trying to make sure that you have the data to support such a goal and be able to back that up. So if I'm a Wall Street analyst, I guess I could look at saying, okay, like what's the TAM of the ability to say like to reach net zero, like what is that worth? And then okay, let's say what percent market share or market capture are you going to have of that kind of like I guess like of that specific market. But again, like if you're looking at it that way, almost like a top down perspective, how are you going to say like okay, I feel like they can get 50% market of that share, 50% of that market, 75% of the market, 25% of the market. You're just pulling numbers out of the air. Like you could believe that and you could have reasonable ability to say this is why I feel like that's justified. But as a Wall Street analyst, I feel like generally it's hard to justify if you're just using TAM and then applying a market share that you don't currently have in that specific market. It's hard to justify how you can get that growth. Like in Tesla's case, like you could say if the TAM is the entire vehicle market and then over time electric vehicles grow to X% of the market and then Tesla maintains or exceeds share, okay, then I can use a top-down analysis to say what deliveries are going to be by each year relative to how EV share is growing and if Tesla maintains or exceeds their current share of that market. But with something like carbon capture, not carbon capture, like getting to net zero, that's a TAM-based model where you have to say you're applying some sort of market share to that. But I feel like you could have a hard time as a Wall Street analyst saying or attributing what share that Palantir should or will get of that entire market. And that's where I feel like the disconnect is. Because you can't,
No, I think
it's hard.
I think it's absolutely fair, man. Really appreciate it. Chris, you want to respond and reflect
Yeah, I
on that?
think, yeah, I would just say one thing that I think sometimes when you look at like from the investment community, you are not allowed to imagine things outside of a box, because if you do, and if you say something that's completely outside of that box, you can be very easily ridiculed. You can be, kind of put to the side, be like called a crazy person, all the stuff that's out there that can go really wrong. So I think a lot of times I've seen people change their theses on Tesla after it's already happened, and sometimes privately they may have had some beliefs that, hey, this something like this can happen, but they were never allowed to say it outright, because if they had, then literally they would get literally ridiculed all over CNBC. Imagine right now in 2013 people saying, I think Tesla's going to be $1 trillion company. Everyone, those talking heads would have been like, are you serious? Like, they don't even have a car right now. Ha 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 ha. And so a lot of times it's something that, like, they're just going to calm down. They're not going to say, especially when you're going into clients, because remember, you're selling products to clients, telling them that, hey, I think there's a car company that in the next 10 years is going to grow to this much money. It's really hard. It's really hard to like tell that to a client without the client telling you, you goddamn crazy, don't touch my money, So I think a lot of times that's where retail can honestly out compete the industry, where there are certain things that are possible that you may not imagine it because you're not allowed to imagine it, that maybe a retail person does. I know, and I'll give you a good example. I knew someone who begged me to buy Apple stock in 2008. And they were like, Chris, you don't understand. Like, Apple, this phone is amazing. I just see so many possibilities with it. And I said, dude, it's a phone. Like, stop. Like, it's a great phone, but it's just a phone. And he's like, you don't understand the possibilities that one day every single person is going to have a phone. And I said, yeah, but then there's going to be 20 different competitors making phones. What makes this thing unique? And he's like, unless you really like go into the nitty gritty of it, you won't understand what the difference between a BlackBerry. And I love my BlackBerry. I invested in BlackBerry all the way to 2013. Can you believe that? That's how much like I loved my BlackBerry. But at the same time, the iPhone was revolutionary. And then after I started using the iPhone in 2014, I was like, how did I miss this? How really did I miss this? So I think the same thing is going to happen with regards to a lot of companies that are coming up. There's going to be definitely new incumbents that come. Some people can't, like I said, sometimes you have to like take off the investment banker hat and put on like crazy imagination hat. I mean, remember when like Elon says right now, oh, we got to get to the moon. We got to get to the moon. About 5 years ago, people would have laughed at him. They're like, bro, why are you trying to get to the moon? Like, I was like, I got an idea. We're going to land rockets. People are like, what? NASA couldn't land rockets, and you're going to land rockets, Mr. Elon Musk over here? Guess what? After the first rocket landing, everyone's like, holy crap, this is possible, right? And that's when things just started to change. So I think right now, to find companies that are going to like change the world is really difficult. And I think right now, retail, as long as you have an imagination, and I'm not saying like you should go YOLO yourself. Like, always be prudent, always be responsible. None of this is financial advice. I'm not saying Palantir is going to be $1 trillion company, but guess what? I see that they have the possibility to get there. So maybe I'm just the, lowly guy, but I see some great potential. And who knows? And I'm glad that we're building this community around this company, because I think we're all starting to see something that maybe some of the other people within the general financial industry aren't seeing. Because I start to see a lot of people are very regular on this, and what's happening is each of us are lending that little bit of expertise that's just saying, well, yeah, I mean, I may not see the same thing you see 100%, but I can see that. I can see a little bit of it. And when we all combine our views together, we create a lot more clarity. I just hope they stop speaking Chinese. Just plain out and just say, this is what we do. This is how we're going to do it. Palantir is communicating to us, but they're speaking a completely different language. Even their promotional videos, I'm like, dude, just say, we're doing this, we're doing that. Like, don't escape. Whatever. I'll stop with the rant.
It's an engineer heavy company. I mean, I agree with everything you guys have said. I mean, see, I have had the same kind of belief and confirmation bias for long, and I have missed so many great investments. But over the time, when I realized, like for example, when I understood the Tesla story, I mean, I investigated more on SpaceX, and I don't know how many people have actually invested in SpaceX before Tesla. I think I am actually, so the moment I realized, so one thing I knew, because I handled major capital projects, so I had a way to wrap around big things at a time, and I have a slightly risky appetite, and this is why I'm very very concerned every time when I give an advice or share something. So when I realized Tesla's story and I investigated, I went big in SpaceX. I mean, same thing like when I was looking for BNPL very early, and I came to Klarna because I do all kind of analysis. I have all the fancy degrees, but I cannot just evaluate these companies purely basis on numbers. I mean, I need that kind of bit of imaginary hat at times, that what it could be, and this is why these investments are risky. But yeah, I mean, this is how I see, and I'm okay with that. I think, having said that, I think, I think that's the time to close our discussion. I think it's been fascinating, and I hope it's one of many we are going to have in our journey of Palantir. And let it be 30%, 50%, maybe 100%. We'll find out.
Who knows?
Be crazy. Be crazy.
Have a good night.
Just wanted to say, like, none of the things I've said reflect my company's views, just my own personal views as an investor, Palantir. Thanks for having me on.
Same here. I am not trying to be like the Palantir financial advisor by any means. I just really like the company. I'm gonna go with what is the deep effing value? That guy, he's like, I like the stock. And I'll stop right there.
No, I mean, same. I mean, I'll put a disclaimer, I think, when I will publish the video. But guys, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you online, and have a good night to both of you.
Good night, guys. Take care.
It's a pleasure. You guys.
Take care. Bye. Let me close it now.